Hello and welcome to VistaTalks, interesting discussions with interesting people from all around the world. I'm your host for today, Priscillia Charles, and I'm delighted today to be joined in Studio 2 by Brian Crooke. Brian is the founder of Workplace Wellbeing Ireland. You're very welcome, Brian.
Great to be here, Priscillia.
Thank you so much, Brian, for joining us. Really appreciate it. So without further ado, let's move on and get on to the show. So first, for our audience who didn't know Brian, it's and see that you studied computer application information system initially in Dublin at Dublin City University, then project management at Stanford University, fantastic. And finally, entrepreneurship and innovation at Trinity College Dublin. So tell me a little bit about your background and everything.
That's right, yeah. So I started out in IT, and when I finished in DCU, I moved pretty much straight into IBM. So I worked with IBM for about 10 years or so, and I was in a consultancy role, a management consultancy role. So as I like to say now, I'm a recovering management consultant. And it was, a really great experience, learned a lot. It was ideal because I was in that consultancy role. So I was working on different client sites. So I got to experience different office space, different cultures, meet lots of different people. So the work was great, learned a lot, but my passion, if I'm being honest, was health and well-being. So I got to kind of develop that while I was there as well. I studied at night, became a personal trainer, sports nutrition diploma as well. And I also got to try out a lot of my kind of theory. So I, started some physical activity classes, five-a-side football, lunchtime running groups. I started giving talks on site, and I also started blogging at the time as well. I set up an office worker health blog. So I kind of married my passion of health and well-being with my experience in the workplace.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing this information with us. So as you mentioned, you started blogging and you mixed your passion really with work, and you founded Workplace Wellbeing Ireland, as mentioned earlier. So I'm curious, can you tell us a little bit about the organization? And it's a community really, so tell us all about it for a global audience who wouldn't be familiar with it.
Sure, yeah. So when I started out, I thought in this area, I thought I could quite smoothly transition from being an IT management consultant to a health and well-being consultant for the workplace. Yeah. But it just didn't work like that. It just, for many different reasons. So what I found was I was meeting lots of interesting people who were trying to do interesting things in this area, this health and well-being space within organizations, but that information just wasn't getting out there, it wasn't being shared. So I set up Workplace Wellbeing Ireland in order to bring those people together, those ideas, that knowledge, and just to become a forum for everyone to come together and to share and to learn. So we started with regular events, needless to say now, where it's almost completely online. The webinars are really interesting and really well attended. But effectively, it's that forum of people, a lot of HR, a lot of wellbeing leaders within organizations, also a lot of wellbeing service providers then as well, coming together to understand what's working and maybe what's not, and try to improve all of our services.
Absolutely. And very useful to anyone looking to learn more about well-being. It is so important, especially at the moment, if I may say. So can you, speaking about workplace wellness, so important as I mentioned, whether it's a current situation with COVID-19 at the moment, but in general, it's we live in such a fast-paced world really. What does it mean to you, and why is it so important, would you say?
Yeah, well, I guess you could look at wellness. We can look at the definition for it. It's it's the state of being in good health, especially as an actively pursued goal. So I like that. You've got to be active. You've got to actually do something about it. Yeah. And then workplace wellness is often might often hear the word health promotion associated with that, with wellness in the workplace. And so there's a nice way to describe it there. Health protection. The World Health Organization will tell us is that kind of trying to avoid disease or the risk of injury. So we quite often we would have seen people in workplaces, maybe health and safety managers. So their role, I would see, is very much as health protection, whereas well-being, wellness in the workplace is more about health promotion. So that idea of supporting, empowering the people within our companies, within our organizations to control and to do something about their own health and well-being. So to empower them to create supportive environments, to put structures in place to allow them to maximize their own well-being.
Thank you very much, and so important indeed. So, as I mentioned, many of us are currently going through a terrible global health crisis, and this has had a huge impact on our lives. How are you currently, with the community and everything that you do, helping global leaders and organizations during this challenging time?
Oh yeah, well, for starters, with webinars, so we've increased the frequency of the webinars. So tomorrow, for example, we have another webinar with the community, and the theme for that webinar is the return to the workplace. So we're going to hear from 3 HR leaders from different Irish organizations in different sectors, and just to listen to them and what are the challenges they're facing, and how are they preparing for that return to the workplace and what that might look like. So there's one thing. And also I've had an in-person training course for the last number of years, an 8-step program for workplace wellbeing program development. So when this was kind of kicking off and we're all working from home, needless to say, I can't deliver that in person. So I updated it to deliver it over a course of 9 webinars. So we had 25 people, 25 mainly HR leaders signed up to that. And that was really successful. So I'm also working on getting that set up online, so people can just avail of it as and when they want to.
Yeah, very useful indeed. Thank you so much. There's so many companies going back to, well, for some of them working in a building, in an office really, some of you trying to get back there, and for some others working from home like myself yet, potentially in the future. But yeah, very unusual and challenging times, and obviously a very careful approach to take. So thank you so much. Yes. So you mentioned webinars, but you also host a podcast. You're a fellow podcaster.
Sure, yeah. Well, I mean, the podcast came about because I was having lots of these really interesting conversations anyway with different people in the industry, different HR leaders, different service providers, maybe over a coffee or over a call. So, and I just find those conversations so interesting. I just thought, like, this should be shared. This kind of information should be shared. So that's pretty much where it started. And it's those conversations, just getting them out there and sharing them with a wider audience. And when I initially started, the goal was to talk about workplace well-being in general, and making workplaces healthier, and all the different ways we could go about that. But of course, just as I was launching, we were also kind of going into a lockdown as well. So there was really only one subject on people's minds. So for all of season 1, all of the conversations were dominated by, like, I had quite a few leaders on in the area of mental health first aid. We're on discussing, how can we support our own mental health at this time? Very similarly, Sea Change, Ireland's National Stigma Reduction Partnership came on to discuss something very similar. So that was the theme for season 1, which is just coming to an end now. And season 2 is, again, the focus will be focused on what everyone is talking about now, and that pretty much is the return to the workplace, and understanding how can we, number one, as organizations, how can we manage that change and that transition? But number 2, then, as people, as individuals, how can we support our own well-being and the well-being of our colleagues as we either work from home, continue to work from home, or as maybe we transition to a blended approach?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Yes, indeed. I suppose many of us haven't experienced this type of situation of going back to a workplace. So, so we're talking about well-being and steps, to ensure everybody's healthy, going back to the office. So, corporation transformation is physical health, nutritional health, mental health programs to workplaces. How do you go about helping companies begin in transformation? And what results have you seen for organizations in general?
Yeah, the first thing I would do if I was chatting with an organization or working with an organization is find out, well, what do they want or what do they need? So rather than tell them, I would find out what they need. So maybe they've got historical survey results, maybe they're hosting regular focus groups, or maybe they've got some new up-to-date pulse surveys that they they can feed in, or maybe there's an understanding of what the needs and the wants are. And if that happens to be in the area of people looking for something in the area of physical health, mental health, or something in the area of nutrition, well, then that's something I can provide for them. But I mean, it really depends on the organization. Some really interesting organizations out there doing really interesting things. Sky Ireland are a good example. They've been on a really interesting journey where they were pretty much they started out doing some physical activity kind of programs. There wasn't a huge take up. They looked at the survey data that was coming back. There was a lot of kind of questions and queries and issues arising in the area of mental health. So they decided to partner with a charity organization called Suicide or Survive, who came in and did a really thorough training program for everyone in the organization, from the senior leadership team right down to the grassroots. And over the course of a couple of years, you can see, and this is why measurement is so important, Sky Ireland have tracked some really interesting data in terms of employee satisfaction has been on the increase. Mental absence as a result of mental health is on the decrease. So some really interesting and positive trends as a result of the effort that they've put in up front. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's taken quite a bit of time, but they're starting to see some really interesting positive outcomes as a result of a long-term investment in the well-being of their employees.
Fantastic, thank you so much. And one of the other activities that you're involved is teaching as a course director, responsible for program design and delivery of the Postgraduate Certificate in Workplace Wellness at Trinity College Dublin. So can you tell us a little bit about this course that aims at, I'm quoting, teaching to design, deliver and sustain wellbeing programs in Irish workplaces?
That's right, yeah. So a real privilege to be involved and to be able to design this program at Trinity. It was our first year this year. So I collaborated with Dr. Sarah Jane Cullinan. We designed the program. It's delivered over 3 modules. So we look initially at the fundamentals of workplace wellness. Module number 2 is on organizational culture. And then module number 3, we get very practical. It's the project and policy implementation. And so we've just come to the end of module 3. So the first year has been a really great success. We had 42 students, so with the absolute maximum number of students.
Fantastic.
It was oversubscribed, yeah. And, it was just a really fantastic cohort, first of all, who made our lives a lot easier. Some really interesting discussions, really engaged bunch of people. And culminated there in our final presentations where we had 7 project teams, so teams of 6 students, and they were working on real world challenges. So I invite organizations that I've got to know through my community, through Wellbeing Ireland. So they submitted a project, so a real world challenge they were facing. And so they were each assigned then a team of 6 students who worked with them for the last month or so on that, and then delivered a presentation on recommendations back to them just in the last week or so. And then we also had, they'll also be getting a final report on those recommendations as well. So win-win for everyone. A win for the organization who are getting, a really experienced bunch of students working on a challenge that they're facing, and they're getting a report out of that. And a win for the students as well, because they're working on developing a relationship with and working on, a real world challenge in a real world organization.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you so much. You can really tell that there's as a desire that people really want to improve the workplace in general. So like always subscribing to the class, which is fantastic. Is there a second year, or with what's currently what the current situation? Is there second year program being planned? And
we're currently, I've got to get through a lot of grading, but yes, it's absolutely on the agenda to work with Trinity and Tangent, the department in Trinity, to put a year 2 together and get that ready. Maybe for the an autumn start, or maybe early Q1 2021 to start that program.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. And is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience? Talk about a specific project that you'd like to, that was a secret that you'd like to mention today, or anything else?
I would say sometimes when I guess the most common question I get asked, or that's asked in the community, is, where do I start? So
Yeah.
I think a lot of people and organizations can feel overwhelmed by, where do I start? And they might see some organizations who is quite far advanced on their program, so it might feel a little overwhelming to get to that point. So, I mean, the good news is you don't need to start with a huge plan. Starting small is absolutely the way to go about it. So start small with a really small initiative, but measure it. So measure before, during, and after if you can, even if that's satisfaction levels, participation levels, but start measuring that. Start building up a bit of a case, a bit of a business case with statistics and data in there, and then start improving over time and going to your senior leadership team and saying, look, we ran this small initiative, here was the uptake, here are some interesting statistics from it. We'd like a little bit of budget or a little bit of flexibility to do X, Y, and Z now. So we'll track that as well and measure that and build it up from there.
Thank you. Thank you so much. One step at a time, but surely, and to achieve great result and good wellness in the workplace. So thank you so much, Brian.
You're very welcome.
So, it's the end, unfortunately, already of today's show with Brian Crooke, who is the founder of Workplace Wellbeing Ireland. So thank you again so much, Brian. It was a pleasure to have you on the show. And please make sure to tune in again to see or listen to the next VistaTalks show.